Where's the power center?
It changes week to week, almost day to day. It's almost exhausting to try to keep up with the, who's up, who's down in this White House right now. I think the most important thing to know, and the reason that these stories actually matter, is because this comes from the top. This is a president who, on the one hand, encourages chaos. He often will pit advisors against each other, try to make them compete. He believes that that is a recipe for success. On the other hand, he's a president who is very aware of his coverage, very aware of how moment-to-moment decisions are playing out. And he recognizes as much as anybody that things have not been going well, that he is not off to a successful start. So he is really trying to figure out what the formula is internally that can get this operation back on track. Someone like Jared Kushner, he has an inevitable advantage because he is the president's son-in-law, yet he comes politically from a much different position than some of these other people who helped Trump win the campaign. And so Trump is drawn to them because of the success of the campaign, because of the connection to the base. So this will ultimately be up to the president to decide. And again, it changes almost day to day.
But you see in the personnel the very same things we see in the policy fights, whether it's health care, whether it's tax reform, that you have an establishment guy in Reince Priebus, let's cut the best deal. You have the America First populist in Steve Bannon, who says establishment be damned and we don't trust you, even if you're the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And Jared Kushner, who Steve Bannon apparently tells his friends, he thinks, well, he's a Democrat, and why do we have a Democrat in a Republican White House?
Yeah, and it goes even deeper than that. If you look at kind of how everything's segmented off here, you have Gary Cohn, who's by far the top economic voice inside the administration, who was a former Democrat and aligns with Jared Kushner on a regular basis. Dina Powell, also a former finance Wall Street individual who kind of lines up with them as well, who's a deputy national security advisor. And so you have these teams kind of form here. And I think the interesting element that I've been kind of watching through is the who's up, who's down on a daily basis. Starting in like the second week of January, K Street was talking about how Gary Cohn was soon going to replace Reince Priebus as chief of staff. That stuff happens every single day. And in terms of the ability of a West Wing to operate functionally, knowing that not only is everybody talking about the changes that are coming, but a lot of it's coming from inside the West Wing. That's extremely difficult in terms of an environment to actually work when you have all of these huge issues that they're dealing with.
And it's a so what, who cares if you're getting things done. Right. If you're getting things done and the president likes this way, okay, whatever. But the Obamacare repeal and replace effort failed. They're nowhere on putting a tax reform plan on paper. They keep talking about infrastructure, but they don't have a plan to go before Congress, and they'll have these same ideological fights, not only within their own team, but on Capitol Hill as well. So some people talk, and the president apparently, when he calls his friends, says, what do you think of my team? How are they doing? You have any suggestions for me? There's still talk, even though the White House the other night tried to say, no, the president told these guys, get it together. So will there be a shakeup? The White House says no. Listen to Kellyanne Conway, the president's counselor.
Is Bannon there to stay? Is Reince Priebus there to stay?
I would assume so. That's up to Donald Trump. In other words, I've heard nothing but rumors and innuendos and press reports that would make any of us believe that anything other than the real shakeup going on in Washington is the way Donald Trump is coming in as a disruptor.
You got that?
Well, it's sort of remarkably honest, right? Her saying, like, I have no idea. Right. And the only person who knows this is Donald Trump 5 minutes before he announces his decision. Right. So, but,
She has some history here, having gone out there saying he had full confidence in Michael Flynn right before his national security advisor was shown the door.
Well, and so, but I think, as you were sort of saying, the upshot of all this is gridlock. Because there is no clear direction coming out of the White House, because Trump has not chosen a side in what are ultimately ideological fights about what direction, what public stance the White House is going to take, and what kind of leadership they're going to exert on, and even what their major things are that they want to get done. He's sort of been all over the place on that. And that has meant that they are at the mercy of the same old Republican divisions in Congress. They are at the mercy of the sort of Keystone Cops operation of the leadership of the House of Representatives. That's not a good look for a president who promised to come in and start getting things done.
And we know that when he feels challenged or when he feels disappointed in the people around him, he tends to get more insular and go like he ran his business with the people he knows best. His daughter Ivanka, his son-in-law Jared, who he knows. And so you see Jared taking trips to Iraq, and a lot of people saying, what are you doing there? I thought you were in charge of Middle East peace. Didn't you just launch a new White House Office on American Innovation that's supposed to reinvent the government? So you get the Jared Kushner criticism. Ivanka Trump has also moved into the West Wing. Listen to her.